Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the talk. My name is Piyush Verma. My pronouns are he, him. Today, we're going to talk about the most exciting topic when it comes to pen testing, pen test report writing. This is where you, as a pen tester, gets to flaunt your findings, right? You get to communicate whatever critical or high severity bugs you found in a document to the customer, right? Before we get started, how many pen testers are there in the crowd? Could you raise your hands? I see a few. Nice to see you as well. How many of you enjoy pen test report writing? Is that your favorite part? Ooh, I'm glad to see at least one hand. Brilliant. Well, I was in the same boat where pen test report writing was not one of the favorite parts or one of the favorite phases when it came to pen test in general. I would rather spend my time finding critical bugs than reporting them. But after spending a lot of time finding the bugs, if I'm not able to communicate them properly in a fashion that the technical and non-technical audiences can receive it, then what's the point, right? That's where Pentest report writing comes into picture, and there are a lot of elements that we can look at to enhance the overall quality of the report itself. Okay. So starting off, I am currently working at HackerOne as a staff technical engagement manager, managing the pen tests and challenges within the HackerOne assessments team. Over the course of my career, I've written, reviewed, and seen several pen test reports, and the experience that I have had, that's what I aim to share with you today. Okay. Quick disclaimer, this is a personal opinion and not that of my current or former employers. The writing style may differ. So your writing style may differ from mine, and that's totally cool, as long as the report is professional and consistent overall, right? So this is the agenda for today, divided into 4 different sections, starting with the elephant in the room, that is the pen test report. Why do we even need a report in the first place? Can't we just find bugs and call it a day? Unfortunately not, because that's required by the customer. It's the only tangible product that they get at the end of the engagement itself. Moving on, we'll talk about impactful writing. Now, this is not going to be an English grammar course, okay? But there are some nuances that we as pen test report writers need to be mindful of and careful of, and avoiding some cardinal sins, to say the least, in a pen test report itself. Then we'll move on to the artificial intelligence piece, see what is the scope of AI when it comes to pen test report writing, and finally wrap it up with the next steps. If the topic is interested to you, then you can delve into deeper with the different courses, modules, so on and so forth. Pentest report writing. Why do we need a pentest in the first place? What is the importance of the report itself? Again, as I said, it's a tangible product that the customer gets at the end of the engagement. It's something that they can use to demonstrate compliance to the different regulations and standards, something that can be used to show and demonstrate due diligence, and finally, address broader areas of improvements within the company. So as an example, if a pen test reported sensitive information and sensitive files available in network shares, then that could translate into security awareness training curriculum for the employees within the organization. Let's take a look at some of the key sections and elements of a pen test report. Now, starting off with a caveat here that this is just one style of writing. There are several thousands of pen test reports out there with different formats, and they are totally cool, okay? Now, these are the key sections for a pen test report, starting with the executive summary. The executive summary is seen as the most important section in the report because this is what the executives within the organization receiving the pen test will actually be looking at, right? So keep the audience in mind. The target audience here are the non-technical people, the executives, the key decision makers within the organization, right? So don't add lengthy statements. Keep it short and sweet. When it comes to executive summary, as the title suggests, it is only a summary that needs to be no more than 2 pages. And that's also a lot of text or area for you to cover. The idea here with the executive summary, the content that you typically see is the different parties that were engaged in the pen test engagement. When was the pen test conducted? What was the scope of the engagement at a very high level? If there were some logistical requirements that need to be mentioned within the executive summary, that will also be highlighted here. If a VPN connection was required to perform a pen test, so on and so forth, right? The idea here is you do not call out just what the issues were, you call out the strengths as well. Where the customer succeeded, what were the good things that you as a pen tester observed in the report. So both strengths and weaknesses at a very high level needs to be reported here, right? And finally, add some key metrics just to show some pictorial depiction of the vulnerabilities. The key metrics could be in a form of a chart or a bar chart or a pie chart, which can be actually, you can actually add vulnerabilities by severity or vulnerabilities by asset, depending on how you actually want to depict the key idea there. But again, keep it very high level. The audience is non-technical, right? So that's the theme behind a report. There would be sections that are technical, there would be sections that are non-technical, right? So it's like a blank canvas, and you are the artist. You need to paint it in such a manner that whoever sees can actually appreciate the art in a different fashion. Talking about technical summary, this is where you can actually dive a little more technical into the technical vulnerabilities themselves. You can include the attacks performed, the results achieved. Typically, you can divide this into most severe vulnerability, which could be based off of the CVSS scoring system, or you can also mention the most common vulnerability that could be based off of the most common CWE category, like broken access control, IDORs, sensitive information available on public shares, so on and so forth. And finally, it's always good to add a table of vulnerabilities, and a typical table would have the ID of the vulnerability title, and the severity. It's also common to see another column called the status column that reflects the status of the vulnerability, whether it is open or closed, right? Moving on to the meat of the report itself, this is where you actually dive into each individual vulnerability identified during the assessment. Starting with the title, you don't have to write an entire paragraph for a title. Let's try to answer 2 important questions with the title. What was identified and where was it identified? Right? So what was the vulnerability and where did you find it? Command injection in the HR portal. It's a very simple example. Let's keep it short and sweet. And then try to capitalize each word. Again, there's a debate about it where people want to capitalize every single word, even the prepositions and adjectives. Whatever your choice is, keep it consistent throughout the report, right? Add the affected asset. This could be the IP address, the URL, or any parameter that was identified as vulnerable. And finally, add a CVSS string. That's totally optional, but it's always good to have that justification in there. And once you know the CVSS string, you can actually translate that into the description itself, right? So if you know what the attack vector is, the access control is, whether the privileges are required or not, you can expand it into a statement, and that becomes the description of the vulnerability itself, right? So in the vulnerability, again, you're trying to answer the same questions. What was the finding? When? Where was it identified? And if you follow the CVSS, it becomes easy to describe the vulnerability itself. Coming to the impact, mention the worst possible case, but keep it real. Don't add over-dramatic or sensationalizing language because it does not serve anybody's purpose, right? Keep it real, keep it short, keep it concise. And with the description, one important thing to note, given that the pen test is a point-in-time assessment, it happened in the past, right? So write it in past tense. Again, no English grammar coaching, but then some logical things that make more sense, right? Because if somebody picks up a Pentest report 2 years later and see that the vulnerability is written in present tense, then they would think the vulnerability still exists, right? Whether it has been fixed or not, that's a different question altogether. Finally, with steps to reproduce, you're trying to walk the reader on how they can reproduce the vulnerability on their own systems. This is where you can actually add screenshots. You can add code snippets that are required to add more depth to the steps of reproduction here. Talking about screenshots, some of the best practices when it comes to screenshots is highlight the key details, redact sensitive information. Nobody wants to see a password or an API key in the report itself, right? So redact any sensitive information, obfuscate it. There are several tools out there, like green shot, flame shot, so on and so forth, right? Make them clear and readable. Don't add an entire browser as a screenshot when you only want to show the top right corner of the browser itself, right? Add multiple screenshots. There is no limit, but don't let the reader zoom in and see a pixelated screenshot where they cannot really figure out what's happening. So highlight the key details that need to be shown in a clear and readable fashion. Adding a caption is a best practice. It basically helps the reader understand what you're trying to depict from the screenshot itself. And finally, add a border. That's an optional thing, because a white screenshot on a white report doesn't really show where the screenshot ends. So adding a border is an optional thing that just makes it look better in a report. Here's another screenshot of Burp Suite. So recommendation, okay, this is another brilliant topic where we have seen recommendations that are generic. We have seen single-liner recommendations as well, such as update to the latest version. How is that actionable? Or implement proper access control. It's not actionable, right? So keep the recommendations effective and actionable. Avoid using single-liners and specify what can actually be actioned on the technical team to fix the vulnerability itself. So instead of writing update to the latest version, expand upon it, do the research, find the latest version, and add the link from the vendor itself to the references section at the bottom. So references section can be simply used to for the reader himself to actually go on and explore the vulnerability themselves. Sometimes these are vendor links, such as Microsoft Patch, so on and so forth. Another quality of life suggestion here is change the URL to a name so that the reader understands what's the purpose of the URL itself, right? And do not over-reference. Do not add 75 URLs, right? Keep it short and sweet. 2 to 3 legit references are a good medium. Talking about appendix, this is where all the supplemental data that could not fit anywhere in the report or made the report look ugly could be added. So if you're doing an internal network assessment that had 75 different CIDRs, you don't need to mention them in the report, just add it to the appendix under the scope heading, right? Then you can actually add the methodology that was used to perform the assessment, add the approach that was taken in different stages, starting from reconnaissance all the way to the reporting stage and to the retesting as well. Define the risk rating. What was used? So if you use CVSS scoring system, what does critical mean? What does high mean? What does medium mean? Define those under the risk rating sections. Identify the key people involved for the assessment, the manager from the consulting department, the lead pen tester, the pen testing team. Add their email address or contact information, so in case the customer has any questions, they can always reach out to them. And finally, the tools that we used to perform the assessment. You can actually add the name of the tool itself and add a one-liner as to what was the purpose of the tool, right? You can always add attack path diagrams. They look beautiful. They are great. They are my favorite. So you can actually see in a visual fashion as to what was done from stage 1 till stage 5. Like, how did the attacker approach, what systems were compromised, how they exploited, and how did they reach the final keys to the kingdom, right? You can use tools like draw.io for the purposes of this. Finally, looking at restrictions. So these are the things that impeded a pen tester's testing efforts. Common items listed here are the testing window, whether the testing window was during business hours, outside of business hours, weekdays, weekends, so on and so forth. Highlight those things, right? It just adds more weight to the point-in-time assessment, whether the environment that was used was stable or not, whether the credentials that were received, did you receive the credentials to perform the pen test 7 days into the assessment? That's almost halfway. So you mention those restrictions under this particular section. Couple of samples with restrictions and without restrictions. And finally, the disclaimer, this is the CYA, basically, right? You are trying to limit the liability, protect the firm from any potential legal actions, and also add in weight to the fact that this, again, is a point-in-time assessment. An attacker or a threat vector with unlimited time and unlimited resources would have more time to attack the same assets, and also the fact that the product evolves over time, right? So there was something that might have changed a week after you performed the pen test. So again, all of those things are important in a disclaimer. So that's about the pen test report. Let's move on to the impactful writing. Again, the key here is avoid using casual language. Okay, it's a professional report, keep it professional. Writing styles may vary. Your writing style may look different than what I will be presenting today, and that's totally cool as long as the message is conveyed to the customer. So in no particular order of priority, some foundational topics to consider are font styles. Again, avoid using funky fonts, Comic Sans, right? Stay consistent with the font styles. So it doesn't mean that you start with a heading with Times New Roman and you end another heading with a different font altogether. Consistency is the key. So if there's one thing that you can take from this talk is keep the report professional and consistent, okay? Font sizes are different for headings, paragraphs, and code blocks. I feel very silly talking about these things here, but then these are important. Capitalize the acronyms and personal nouns, please. Please do that. It's a cardinal sin not to capitalize all the acronyms. And whenever you use an acronym in the first time in a report, define it. Define what an acronym actually means. Date format, again, this is very debatable. Whichever date format you want to use it, but please use it consistently through the report, right? So this one that you see on the screen is defined by ISO. Feel free to use that as well. Tense, we basically covered with the vulnerability description, where a vulnerability is a point-in-time Pentest is a point-in-time assessment, so write the vulnerability details in a past tense. And present tense is where you're actually walking the reader through how to reproduce the steps. So steps to reproduce could be in present tense. Another exception there would be executive summary. That could be in present tense as well, or parts of it. Writing in third person comes across as professional. If you write something in first person, it rather reads as a journal entry or an entry in your diary of a person, right? I identified this, I did this today. That's not really the purpose of a report, right? So writing in third person is, again, another good practice. And finally, avoid using contractions. There are several topics around this as well, but these are the key things that I think would improve the overall quality and standards of a report. So write to the point. Avoid using fluff. Avoid bloated statements. I know we love writing. We want to show the impact of a vulnerability, but keep the statements concise. Avoid using redundant words, as you can see in this example. The same message can be conveyed in a simple statement. Another example under the bloated statement, the same message again can be conveyed in a smaller statement. Right, so avoid the fluff. AI. Let's see what's the possibility with AI today. So start with caution. Again, avoid sharing sensitive information, sensitive customer information with any random LLM model. You can use AI to draft vulnerability write-ups based off of the CWE or the name of the vulnerability category itself, right? But don't enter any sensitive customer information in the AI if they're not aware about it, and you don't know how the information will be translated further in their systems. Another use case is tailor the content for a specific audience. You can enter a technical jargon there and ask the AI to present that message to a CISO. How would you translate that for a CISO or a CEO? How would you actually translate a SQL injection vulnerability for operational, reputational, or financial damage to the CISO, right? Because that's what they care about at the end of the day. So suggest concise strategic recommendations and validate the CVSS score. So validate the CVSS, you see an asterisk next to it, because I haven't seen any accurate results with the CVSS validation. Talking about AI, AI is built into multiple different platforms. It's not uncommon to see that. A lot of pen testing platforms do it. HackerOne has their own AI system built into the platform called Hi that helps the pen testers, hackers, bug bounty hunters, so on and so forth, to assist with their report writing skills. You can use Hi to summarize the vulnerabilities, to find a fix for the same vulnerability that was reported, right? You can actually use Hi to help you with the how to fix the vulnerability itself, how to address the different audiences based on that. And then finally, you can use Hi to enhance the grammar of the written content that you had, right? It's very similar to Grammarly in that sense, but then it's available within the platform itself, so you don't have to go outside the platform. That's the idea. If everything is within a certain platform, within the same ecosystem, then that's perfect, right? Think of AI as an assistant. Whatever AI spits out is not the gospel, right? Try to use that as the template. Create your own automated templates for different vulnerabilities and customize them. That's how you start to stop hating report writing, right? And finally, in terms of next steps, if you want to dive in deeper into the topic, there are multiple courses, such as the 0-point security. This is the same company that has the CRTO certification, Certified Red Team Operator. They have a course specifically dedicated to report writing called the Art of Report Writing. OffSec and Hack the Box have specific modules within their pen testing curriculum that speak about report writing, right? Looking at the reporting tools themselves, Microsoft Word, Google Docs have been the traditional tools, but there are multiple platforms that can be used to generate and draft vulnerability reports, such as Sysraptor here, Plextrack, and Redis. Sysraptor is open source. It's relatively new, but Plextrack is a very commercial enterprise product that can be used to create vulnerability write-ups. And then at the end of the day, you use that database of vulnerabilities, start a new project for a different customer, and generate the beautiful PDF that is customized to your work, right? And that's it. Thank you so much, everybody, for patiently listening. And besides,
thank you, Piyush. So we maybe have a time for one question before we hear from our lunch sponsor. So does anyone have any questions? Okay.
Not a question. I'm going to get the question to him later on, but I'm going to add one thing there, which is like, whenever you're taking screenshots.
I can't hear him.
When you're taking the screenshots.
Keeping the background white is better because like people will actually photocopy your reports and it becomes a black blob.
Keeping the background white is better because the screenshots pick up black blobs.
Photocopy of the reports later in management and everything becomes like in the big black blobs.
Okay. So that is a little piece of advice, actually. Thank you for making a white background on your screenshots. Okay. Gentleman in the sunglasses. One last question. Sorry, I'm not going to get to the other one. But go ahead, gentleman in the sunglasses.
Thanks, Piyush. Great presentation.
Thank you.
In your opinion, how much of pen test reporting is effectively cybersecurity masturbation?
How much is Pentest supporting cybersecurity masturbation?
Well, That's a very interesting
Was that what you
question.
said? Sorry, I might have misheard you. That's what you said. Okay.
I heard that right, yeah. Wow. Nobody prepared me for that question.
Are you basically saying is it cybersecurity theater?
Not theater necessarily. It's more like one cybersecurity professional saying to another, "Hey, check this shit out. Look at this stuff that I've discovered, and look at how elaborately I've done that." But at the end of the day, the question we need to be answering is, "So what?" And
Yes.
move on. We say it doesn't matter what the writing style is. Everyone's got their choices. There's problems with that. We say, the presentation needs to be elaborate and detailed. This isn't necessarily disagreeing on elements of the report, but the executive summary portion, the part that's supposed to motivate change in an organization, is often the only part that gets presented to the business absent additional interpretation by a risk team.
Right.
Are we focusing too much on that PDF, which is problematic in and of itself, ingesting it into risk management systems and so on and so forth? But is that PDF that we produced really just to impress ourselves and to justify the spend we just put into a pen test? Or is there, how do we make it a better product to incorporate into our processes for vulnerability management? Because it is a point-in-time artifact. Once it's been produced, and once the vulnerabilities have been hopefully corrected, that's it. Its value diminishes rapidly.
Okay. So
I can answer that.
You can answer that. I have
Yeah.
so many thoughts, but go ahead
I
because it's your
actually
talk.
lost my chain of thoughts there, but then I think the Pentest report document helps justify a lot of things, and then it can fade away over the period of time, as you said, because it loses its value. But then it helps paint a picture over a period of time how the product or whatever was tested has evolved, right? Now, I get it. Like, Pentest report writing is not the greatest thing out there that as pen testers we enjoy doing. And there are a lot of different ways to automate things, make life much easier. But then at the end of the day, that's the only tangible product a customer gets.
I don't know if I agree with everyone enjoys the writing part, but that's just personal experience from reading thousands of reports in the past.
Yeah.
The quality can range from this is actively harming me as I read it to I want to bind this and put it on my shelf. But at the end of it, if I'm ingesting this and I need to do something with it, I want something I can, in a JSON format or some other programming format, I can immediately move into vulnerability management and do something with.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I need a product I can take to the business who are going to fund the remediation that clearly and very articulately says this is why we need to fix the problem. Understanding that some of that responsibility is my own as the interpreter of that report, but ensuring that I have a piece of material that gets me going down the line. That's really the value I'm getting out of this on top of finding a bunch of issues.
Absolutely. So again, a Pentest report is just one of the deliverables. So let's say, for example, again, I'm not going to talk about HackerOne here because that's what we use. Our platform itself, if you can import the vulnerabilities and reports into Jira, for example, with your tool that makes more sense to you in a way that you can create a dashboard of vulnerabilities yourself, and you can transfer those to your developer team, that makes more sense for you because at the end of the day, you're not going to use the PDF and send the PDF to different departments. And alongside that, alongside the PDF, there are different other deliverables that a customer perhaps asks, such as a CSV file of the vulnerability reports. Right? That's one old-fashioned way. But nowadays, with platform integrations, you can use software like Jira and others to integrate within your own ecosystem so you can actually use it the way you want to use it.
Can we make that standard, I guess is the question. So there's an expectation for any service nowadays
Yeah.
that it should arrive in a multitude of formats that make it possible to use.
I think, yeah,
It
I
is,
think
yeah.
maybe we need to sort of wrap this up. So I want to say thank you. Maybe the two of you can meet afterwards and continue the conversation. But for now, thank you so much for Piyush for your talk.